Welcome. I'd really appreciate if you could drop a comment with your thoughts and reactions as you listen. Your feedback helps me craft better stories for you. The sunflowers towered over the fields, their golden faces turning slowly to follow the sun. Thomas drove past mile after mile, his grip tightening on the steering wheel as an inexplicable sense of dread grew in his stomach. He had found the listing on a dark corner of the internet, an anonymous painting for sale with no information about the artist. But the image had captivated him, an endless vista of sunflowers beneath a burning orange sky, as if the flowers were all that existed in the world. Mesmerized, he had tracked the seller to this isolated stretch of farmland. As Thomas pulled up to the lone farmhouse, he saw her, a solitary figure standing amidst the sunflowers, her face hidden in the shadows of her hood. "Evelyn," he called out hesitantly. She turned and nodded, motioning him over without a word. Her eyes were an icy blue, piercing yet distant as they studied him. "You came for my painting," she said in a soft, hollow voice. Thomas nodded, unsettled by her stillness. "Tell me what you see in my work." He struggled to find the right words under her penetrating gaze. "Your sunflowers. They're haunting, as if they hide some deeper meaning." Evelyn's lips curled into a faint, mirthless smile. "Perhaps they do. Would you like to see my fields?" Thomas followed her down the lonely rows, the sunflowers towering over their heads. Their heavy perfume hung thick in the air, cloying yet somehow sickly. Sweet. Evelyn's descriptions were minimal yet vivid. The flowers drink the sun, growing fat on its light and heat. Soon they will burst and wither, leaving nothing but blackened corpses beneath the burning sky. A nameless dread crept over Thomas as the sunflowers seemed to lean in, listening. He felt like an intruder in their world, an outsider staring into mysteries not meant for human eyes. When he turned to Evelyn for reassurance, she had vanished without a trace into the endless golden rows. That night, Thomas dreamed of the sunflowers. He walked through field after field, their heavy heads swaying and creaking in a soundless wind. As the sky darkened, the flowers began to twist and writhe, as if straining against some unseen force. Their faces bulged and contorted into leering, lipless grins as rows of jagged teeth emerged from blackened mouths. Thomas woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. Scrambling to the window, he saw the sunflowers outside standing as still as sentinels in the moonlight. But their grinning faces were seared into his mind, and he knew sleep would not come again that night. In the morning, he would return to Evelyn's fields, demanding answers. But little did he know the horrors that awaited him there, and the darkness that had already taken root in his soul. The sun rose blood, red over the fields, as if the sunflowers themselves were bleeding. Thomas rubbed grit from his eyes, haunted by fitful dreams. He replayed every word of Evelyn's cryptic descriptions, searching for clues in the gaps between. Driving to her farm, a growing sense of unease gnawed at him. The sunflowers' grinning faces from his nightmare were seared into his mind. He swore he saw them leering from the roadside as he passed. By the time he pulled up, Thomas was gripped by a feverish desperation for answers. "Evelyn!" he called, striding between the rows. Only silence answered. Anger and panic rose in his throat as he plunged deeper. The sunflowers closing in. Had she manipulated him for her own sinister ends, then disappeared to leave him lost in her twisted game? A flash of white caught his eye. Pushing aside a sunflower head, Thomas froze. Laid out beneath the flowers was a painting, its canvas stained brown. He recognized Evelyn's minimalist style at once. A ritual scene buried in a mass grave, bodies contorted and faces locked in silent screams. Thomas fell to his knees, retching violently. Through the haze of nausea, fragments of Evelyn's descriptions echoed in his mind. The flowers drink the sun, leaving nothing but blackened corpses. His hands trembled as he picked up the painting with 2 fingers, dropping it as if burned. A crackle made him spin, heart pounding. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hello, Thomas," Evelyn's hollow voice whispered. "I see you found my offering. Are you ready for the truth about my sunflowers?" "What have you done?" he gasped. Her soft laugh sent chills down his spine. "Come now. Don't you want to understand? My fields hold sacred mysteries, truths that can set you free or destroy you if you remain lost in darkness. The choice is yours." Thomas squeezed his eyes shut, clutching his head. "No more games, Evelyn. Tell me what's really happening here." Her reply was chillingly calm. "Meet me at sunset in the center of the fields. There, you will witness the sunflower's true purpose and decide your fate. But be warned, some doors once opened can never be closed again." The line went dead. Thomas stared at the phone in his shaking hand, feeling the last threads of sanity slipping away. He had to know the truth, no matter the cost. If Evelyn sought to consume him in her madness, he would not go quietly into the night. As the sun sank behind the fields in a blaze of orange, Thomas walked through the rows, gripped by a primal terror. Every rustle of leaves sent his heart racing, half, expecting to find Evelyn's grinning sunflower, creatures lurking in the shadows. A figure stood silhouetted ahead against the burning sky. "Evelyn," he called, voice cracking. She turned slowly. "You came. I knew the hunger for truth would drive you. In the end." Thomas stopped a few feet away. Eyes narrowed. "No more games. Show me what you've been hiding in these fields." Evelyn smiled, a terrible, mirthless stretching of lips. "As you wish. Come." She led him to a clearing ringed by sunflowers, their faces black pits in the dying light. At the center was an altar stone, stained dark and cracked down the middle. "For generations, my family has served as caretakers of this sacred place," Evelyn intoned. "We make our offerings to the flowers so they may thrive under the sun's life, giving rays. But the land grows thirsty, and darker rites are required to appease it." She pulled a wickedly curved knife from her robe, its edge glinting red. Thomas stumbled back with a gasp. "No, stop this, please." But Evelyn's eyes blazed with a feverish light. "The time has come for a new offering, Thomas. Will you join willingly in the rite, or must you be taken?" Her laugh echoed through the fields as she lunged, knife raised. Thomas threw himself aside just in time, feeling the blade whisper along his cheek. He scrambled up and ran, the sunflower's grasping hands raking his skin. Behind him, Evelyn's voice rose in an unearthly keening as the ritual began. Bursting from the field's edge, Thomas fell to his knees, heaving. The sun had set, leaving the world in darkness. As the keening faded into the night, he knew only one thing for certain. He had to flee this place, and Evelyn's madness forever. But her grinning sunflower, creatures were seared into his soul, and in the shadows of dreams to come, they would be waiting. The virtual world dissolved around me as I opened the mysterious app, my surroundings pixelated into a disorienting kaleidoscope before coalescing into a dense forest. Towering trees blocked out the sky, their gnarled branches twisting together like grasping fingers. I took an unsteady step forward on the damp earth. My breath quickened as panic set in. How did I get here? The last thing I remembered was browsing the dark corners of the web, curiosity getting the better of me. An innocuous downloadable had caught my eye, promising answers to life's deepest questions. Like a fool, I had installed it without a second thought. Now I was trapped God knows where, with no exit in sight. The app provided no instructions, no map, nothing but an endless maze of trees in every direction. I spun around, searching desperately for any clue. That's when I noticed the first message etched into the mossy trunk of an ancient oak. Deeper you must go if answers you seek. I shuddered. Someone or something was clearly toying with me. Yet curiosity and fear battled within. What mysteries lay at the center of this place? Taking a shaky breath, I chose a path at random and continued into the thickening forest. The trees closed in, their gnarled branches blocking out the pale light. I stumbled over gnarled roots as my eyes struggled to adjust to the deepening gloom. Panic rose in my throat like bile. This was no game. I was well and truly lost with no way out. My breaths came in shallow gasps, each inhale filling my lungs with the cloying scent of damp earth and decay. A crackle in the brush jolted me from my spiraling thoughts. I whirled to see a hulking shape emerge from the shadows. 8 spindly legs supported an oblong body covered in chitinous plates. Its face, if you could call the cluster of bulbous eyes and twitching mandibles a face, tilted as if sizing me up. My blood ran cold. This thing was no forest creature. It was a nightmare given form. Worse, I sensed it was no random encounter. It knew me, could see into my mind. Memories long buried bubbled to the surface, threatening to drown me in their toxic waters. I turned and fled blindly, branches whipping my face as I crashed through the undergrowth. The thing gave chase with unnatural speed, its clacking mandibles a death knell behind me. Snapping at my heels, it forced me to relive moments I'd spent years trying to forget. His rough hands pinning me down as I screamed. The sneering faces of classmates as rumors spread. My parents' looks of disappointment and shame. Sobbing, I staggered on, pushed to my limits by guilt and self-loathing. There, ahead, another message carved into the bark of a white oak. Face your demons if you wish to be free. With shaking hands, I turned to face my tormentor. It halted, regarding me with those bulbous eyes that saw straight into my soul. I had to do this. Closing my eyes, I let the memories wash over me once more, feeling each twisted emotion. And slowly, they lost their power. When I opened my eyes again, the nightmare was gone. Ahead, the trees finally parted to reveal a clearing. And, at its center, a towering stone structure overgrown with moss and vines. The entrance beckoned like the jaws of some great beast. I had faced my demons and survived, but what fresh terrors awaited me inside, stealing my nerves. I stepped over the threshold into darkness. The end was close, but I was not yet free. Erica raced through the clearing, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous entrance hall of the ancient stone structure. She slowed her pace, catching her breath as her eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through cracks in the crumbling walls. Moss-covered pillars lined a central path leading deeper inside. Erica followed it cautiously, every sense on high alert. The air grew thick and humid, carrying the cloying scent of decay. She wiped beads of moisture from her brow, her palm coming away grimy. A scuttling sound made her freeze. Slowly, she turned to find one of the spider creatures perched atop a nearby pillar, regarding her with those bulbous eyes. But this one was different. Larger, with chitinous plates of deep purple and blue. A low, guttural clicking issued from its mandibles. Erica backed away slowly, only to bump into something solid. She whirled to find another had joined the first, blocking the path behind. Her heart raced as more scuttles announced the arrival of more monsters, surrounding her on all sides. She was trapped with no escape. A hissing laugh echoed through the chamber, sending chills down Erica's spine. Well done, little mouse. You've made it farther than most. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, its source impossible to pinpoint. Who are you? Erica called out shakily. Why have you brought me here? All in good time, the disembodied voice replied. Suffice it to say, I find your kind amusing. Your fears, your regrets, your fragile psyches crumbling under pressure. It's quite the show. Erica's blood ran cold. She was just a plaything, a puppet for this sadist's twisted games. Rage and panic warred within as the spiders closed in, mandibles clicking hungrily. She was trapped with no escape, about to become another victim. Unless. She thought back to the messages left throughout the maze. This place preyed on people's inner demons, used them against their victims. But Erica had faced her trauma and survived. An idea took shape, crazy yet her only chance. She steeled her nerves and shouted, "I know what you are. You feed on people's weaknesses, turn their fears against them. But I faced mine and broke free of your control." Her words were met with another hissing laugh. "Foolish girl, no one escapes me in the end." "Then face me yourself, coward," Erica challenged. A tense silence followed before the voice replied coldly, "So be it." The spiders parted as the stone floor rumbled. From a fissure emerged a hulking, 8-limbed form, easily twice the size of the others. Its chitinous armor glinted with an oily sheen, plates of deepest crimson. Tonight, dark eyes regarded Erica from beneath jutting brow plates. This was the maze's true master, its creator. Erica stared up at the monster, her resolve wavering, but she had come this far. Steeling her nerves, she prepared to face her final challenge and uncover the maze's deepest secrets, whatever the cost. The dense fog rolled across the still waters of the bayou as Agent Sarah Ross steered her boat into the overgrown marsh. She cut the engine and let the small vessel drift silently toward the shore, straining her eyes to pierce the gloom. Somewhere in this isolated wilderness lay the answers she sought. As her boots sank into the muddy bank, Sarah shivered despite the humid air. An eerie stillness hung over the swamp as if even the wildlife sensed to avoid this place. She followed a crumbling stone path that wound deeper into the trees, the fog seeming to close in behind her. Soon, the skeletal remains of a house emerged from the mist. Weathered boards sagged at odd angles, and shattered windows gaped like empty eye sockets. Spanish moss dripped from the rotting roof like a funeral shroud. Sarah pulled her flashlight from her belt and clicked it on, sweeping the beam across the dilapidated facade. The front door creaked open at her touch, the hinges crying in protest. Dust motes danced in her light as Sarah picked her way through the debris. Strewn foyer, scraps of paper and broken furniture were strewn about as if fleeing from some unseen terror. She climbed the rotting staircase, testing each step before committing her weight. The bedrooms held more signs of a hasty departure. In one, a child's mobile still swung gently from the ceiling, its painted stars faded with time. In another, a rocking chair creaked back and forth of its own accord. Sarah paused, the small sound sending a chill through her, then chided herself for letting her imagination run wild. Deeper in the house, she found heavy steel doors that seemed out of place in the decaying structure. A fingerprint scanner mounted on the wall was the only clue to what lay beyond. As she examined it, her light flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, Sarah could have sworn she heard whispers just beyond the threshold. She spun with a gasp, heart pounding, but saw only swirling dust in the beam of her flashlight. "Get a grip, Ross," she told herself sternly. "You came for answers, not to scare yourself silly with every bump in the night." Steeling her nerves, Sarah continued her search. In a cluttered study, she discovered files and documents confirming this had been one of international criminal Hieu Ming Ngo's safe houses. Her quarry had clearly used this place for some sinister purpose before abandoning it to the encroaching swamp. But what exactly had transpired within these rotting walls? As night fell, Sarah realized she would have to continue her investigation under cover of darkness. She found an intact bedroom and barricaded herself inside, setting up a small camp with her supplies. But even with the door reinforced, she could not escape the feeling of being watched from the shadows. She drifted into a fitful sleep, haunted by fragments of dreams. Twisted shapes lurked at the edges of her vision, always just out of sight. When Sarah awoke with a start, she could have sworn she heard the faintest of whispers on the wind. "You'll never escape me." The fog had grown heavier as Sarah explored the bayou house, now a shroud that seemed to muffle all sound. She picked her way cautiously down the rotting staircase, flashlight beam dancing across the walls. Something felt different this morning, an ominous shift in the atmosphere that raised the hairs on her neck. In the study, a glint caught her eye. Lying on the floor was an old Polaroid photo, its image half obscured by dust. Sarah blew it clean and froze. It was a snapshot of her own face, eyes closed in sleep. How had this gotten here? She whirled, pulse racing, but saw no one. Heart in her throat. Sarah did a sweep of the house. Everything appeared as she had left it, except for a new addition. Scrawled on the wall in red paint was a single word: watching. She backed away, unsettled. This place was getting to her, making her doubt her senses. Sarah had faced far worse than childish pranks. She was losing focus, and that could get her killed. Taking a steadying breath, she resumed her search with renewed determination. In the basement, Sarah discovered a high-tech surveillance system, screens flickering with an array of camera feeds. One monitor showed a live shot of the bedroom where she had slept. She watched in horror as a figure detached itself from the shadows, long hair obscuring its face, and turned to stare straight into the lens with a chilling smile. Sarah bolted upstairs, heart pounding. This couldn't be real. She fumbled for her phone to call for help, only to find the device dead. As the fog pressed in, a low chuckle echoed all around her. "You didn't really think it would be that easy, did you, Agent Ross?" A distorted voice spoke through hidden speakers, its tone mocking yet strangely familiar. "I've been watching you for so long, learning all your fears. Now, it's your turn to entertain me." Sarah spun, trying to locate the source of the voice. "NGO, where are you? Show yourself, you coward!" Laughter answered her, echoing impossibly from every direction at once. "Oh, I'm not there, my dear. I'm right here inside your head where I've always been." Sarah clutched her head, unnerved. This had to be some kind of trick, a hallucination brought on by stress. But how was it doing this, preying on her fears with such unnatural precision? "You won't break me," she growled, though her voice shook. "Isn't it?" the voice purred. "How can you be sure when I control what you see and hear? I know your every weakness, your sister, that night in the woods. Soon you won't be able to tell reality from the game." Sarah stumbled as a wave of dizziness struck. Flashes of memory assaulted her. Her sister's screams, the snap of branches, the gleam of eyes in the dark. She sank to her knees, fighting panic. This couldn't be happening, not now when she was so close to the truth. As her vision swam, a figure coalesced from the fog. Long black hair veiled its face, but two eyes stared out, cold and merciless. It reached for her with spidery fingers. Sarah lashed out with a cry, her fist meeting only empty air. When she looked again, nothing was there, only swirling mist. Was she losing her mind? Sarah didn't know how much more of this psychological torture she could take before shattering completely. With a massive effort, she dragged herself up on shaking legs. She had to get out, had to find help before Ngo's twisted games destroyed her grip on reality forever. Stumbling through the peeling front door, Sarah was met with a wall of dense white fog that swallowed her flashlight beam. Panic rose in her throat as she realized the bayou had disappeared, leaving her stranded in an endless void. A whisper brushed her ear. "You'll never escape me." Sarah stumbled blindly through the engulfing fog, heart pounding. She had to get away, had to find help before Ngo's torments drove her mad. But which way was out? The mist seemed to shift and swirl, disorienting her. No matter which direction she turned, there was only an impenetrable white void. She was trapped, lost in this nightmare with no escape. A low chuckle echoed all around her. "Have you finally lost your way, Agent Ross?" I told you, you'll never escape me. This place is mine now." "No!" Sarah screamed. "This isn't real! You can't do this to me!" But even as she said the words, doubt gnawed at her resolve. What if Ngo had somehow found a way to manipulate her perceptions completely? What if she was already too far gone to tell reality from his twisted games? The fog coalesced before her into a tall, faceless figure. "I control what you see, what you hear," the voice whispered. "You belong to me now." Sarah lashed out with a cry. Fists meeting only missed. When she looked again, the apparition had vanished. She sank to her knees, shivering as panic threatened to overwhelm her. Memories surfaced unbidden. Her sister's body in the woods, the jury finding her not guilty by reason of insanity. Was that really how it had happened? Or had Ngo twisted the truth until she no longer knew? "Get a grip," she told herself fiercely. "Don't let him win." With effort, Sarah pushed the disturbing images away and focused on steadying her breathing. She had faced her share of monsters before. She would not succumb to this one. Rising unsteadily, Sarah closed her eyes and listened. At first, there was only the muffled roar of the fog. But then, a distant splash. The bayou. She struck out purposefully, following the subtle sounds that hinted at the outside world beyond Ngo's twisted realm. After what seemed like hours, Sarah emerged at the water's edge, gasping with relief. But her joy was short-lived. Before her, the pea soup fog stretched as far as she could see in every direction, an impenetrable shroud. She was still trapped. A crackle made her spin, flashlight beam slicing the mist. For a heartbeat, she glimpsed a figure standing ankle, deep in the bayou, long black hair whipping around a pale, smiling face. Then it was gone. "You'll never escape," the voice whispered in her ear. "I know all your secrets. I know what really happened that night. Why don't you tell me about your sister?" Sarah stumbled back from the bayou, heart racing. She couldn't let Ngo get inside her head, prey on her weakest moments. But as the fog closed in, memories surfaced unbidden. Her sister's body lying broken in the leaves. The jury finding her not guilty by reason of insanity. Was that really how it happened? Sarah no longer knew what was real. Ngo had woven his lies so deeply she could no longer separate truth from fiction. Doubt gnawed at the edges of her mind, threatening to unravel her completely. "You can fight this," she told herself fiercely. "Don't give in to the madness." With effort, Sarah pushed the disturbing images away and focused on steadying her breathing. She had faced monsters before. She would not succumb to this one. As if in response, the fog swirled and parted before her. At the end of a twisting path lay the bayou house, windows glowing with a warm, inviting light. Sarah approached warily, senses on high alert. Could it be a trap? The front door creaked open at her touch. Inside, a fire crackled merrily in the hearth, while candles flickered on dusty sideboards. Sarah swept the main room with her flashlight, but saw no signs of disturbance. A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun, weapon drawn, but the hallway was empty. Her pulse raced. Was Ngo toying with her, or was this another layer of his insidious manipulation? A whisper brushed her ear. "Come find me, Agent Ross. Let the games begin." Sarah steeled herself. Very well, two could play at this game. If facing her demons was the only way to break free of this nightmare, then so be it. She would not back down from any challenge, no matter how twisted. Methodically, she searched the house room by room, senses on high alert. Nothing seemed amiss until she reached the top floor, where an attic door stood ajar, spilling golden light. Sarah climbed the creaking stairs slowly, weapon raised. The attic was empty, save for a single chair positioned in a pool of candlelight. As she watched, a figure detached itself from the shadows. Long black hair veiled its face, but Sarah would know those cold eyes anywhere. She spat. "Show yourself, coward!" A chuckle answered her. "We've played this game long enough, don't you think? It's time for the final trial." Ngo's distorted voice echoed all around her. "Sit. Let's see if you can handle the truth." Sarah hesitated, every instinct screaming this was a trap, but she had come too far to back down now. Gripping her weapon, she took a seat. "Enough games. Ngo. It's over." Darkness swallowed her words. When light returned, Sarah found herself in a nightmarish vision of the past. She was back in those woods, reliving her sister's final moments. But this time, the truth would be revealed. The woods closed in around Sarah as she relived that fateful night. Through the trees, she saw her younger self stumbling through the undergrowth, sobbing in panic. Ahead, her sister lay broken and still where she had fallen. But this time, as Sarah reached her, the girl's eyes fluttered open. "Help. Me," she rasped with her dying breath. Sarah recoiled in horror. This wasn't how she remembered. Was it? Doubt clawed at her mind. Then from the shadows emerged a figure, long black hair obscuring its face. It was Sarah, but not. Eyes cold and empty as they regarded the dying girl. In her hands was a bloody rock. A choked sob escaped Sarah's lips as the truth crashed over her. "No, it can't be." Laughter echoed all around her. "You finally see the truth," Igio's voice purred. "All these years living with the guilt. When you were the monster all along." "No!" Sarah screamed, hands over her ears. "You're lying! I would never!" Darkness swallowed her words. When light returned, Sarah found herself back in the Bayou house, collapsed on the attic floor. Had it all been another of Ngio's twisted lies? Or had she uncovered a truth too horrific to bear? She didn't know how long she lay there, torn by anguish and doubt. Finally, with a massive effort, Sarah dragged herself up on shaking legs. She had to get out, had to find answers beyond this place of madness. Stumbling downstairs, she was startled by a knock at the front door. With trembling hands, Sarah opened it to find a police officer standing on the porch, rain slicking his uniform. "Ma'am, are you all right? We received a distress call from this location." Sarah sagged against the doorframe in relief. It was over. She had survived Ngio's final game, but as the officer led her to the waiting cruiser, she glanced back to see a figure watching from an upstairs window. Long black hair and pale face, barely visible past the fluttering curtains. Their eyes met and Ngo smiled, a smile that said this was far from over. Sarah would be forever haunted by what she had seen, and the gnawing doubts that now plagued her soul. She had survived, but at what cost? Ngo would always be with her, lurking in the shadows of her mind.